Hey everyone, welcome back to the Incredible India podcast series. I'm Debbie.
And I'm Tim. Great to be here.
So today we're doing a deep dive into something really fascinating, the heart of Mumbai. We're going to explore its, incredibly rich history and its amazing architecture.
Yeah, and we're doing it through the lens of a specific walking tour that was described in the source material we looked at.
Right. The sources described this guided tour focusing specifically on Mumbai's Gothic and Art Deco styles. And we also got to see some pretty interesting reviews from people who've actually done the walk.
Which adds a nice layer of real-world experience to it.
Exactly. So our mission today really is to unpack all that info. We want to pull out the key insights, the important bits, to give you a really clear sense of what makes this particular way of looking at Mumbai so, compelling and significant.
It's like getting a feel for how the city grew, right?
Wow.
You can see it in the buildings.
Totally. So the core idea based on the sources is this, it's a 3-hour guided walk. And it uses the city's architecture, specifically the Gothic and Art Deco stuff, to tell Mumbai's story.
And what a story. The sources really emphasize the scale of change, from this small fishing village centuries ago to the huge global trading hub it is now. It's kind of mind-blowing.
It really is. And the buildings featured, they're not just old. The material points out they're magnificent structures built over the last couple of centuries.
And many of them together are actually UNESCO World Heritage Site. That tells you something about their importance, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Global significance. So the itinerary listed in the sources, that's kind of our map for today. Key places mentioned are, CST Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Terminus, then Eros and Regal Cinemas, the High Court, Rajabai Tower, Empress Court, and of course, the Gateway of India.
A lot of iconic spots.
Definitely. And the sources mention that for most of them, you're mainly seeing the outside. But there are exceptions, like CST and the Gateway, where you get a bit closer, maybe even go inside parts or around the area.
Right. And what seems really great, based on what we read, is how these buildings aren't just shown off. They're used to, unlock chapters of Mumbai's history.
Okay, so let's dig into some of these architectural wonders. What do they tell us? Let's start where the tour starts. CST, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Terminus.
Right. So the sources confirm, first off, it's a UNESCO heritage building. Big deal. And architecturally, wow. It's described as probably the best example of Victorian Gothic revival in India, period.
But it's not just a carbon copy of something from London, is it? That's what struck me.
No, exactly. And that's maybe the most interesting part. The sources highlight this incredible blend.
Yep.
You've got the core Victorian Gothic style, but then it's fused with themes from traditional Indian architecture.
Like what kind of themes?
Well, things like intricate stone carvings that show Indian animals, local plants, stuff you definitely wouldn't find on a typical Gothic building in Europe. It was sort of an attempt, during the colonial era to create an imperial style that felt specific to India.
Interesting. A blend of power and place.
Yeah, something like that. And it's not just a historical monument. The sources make a point of saying this is one of the busiest train stations in the world.
That figure was staggering. Over 6 million commuters every single day.
It gives you this real jolt of the city's modern energy right alongside the historical grandeur. And people still call it VT, Victoria Terminus, its old name. That history is just baked into daily life.
Okay, so from CST, the tour description says you head towards Flora Fountain. You pass Sterling Cinema, Azad Maidan.
Right. Flora Fountain, described as Mumbai's most famous fountain. It's made from Portland stone, which was imported, and it has a statue of Flora, the Roman goddess of flowers. So very European influence there.
But there's another layer, isn't there? Something more recent.
Yes. The source mentions it's also dedicated to the martyrs who fought for the state of Maharashtra back in the 60s. So even this decorative fountain carries bits of political history. It's fascinating how these layers build up.
It really is. Okay, next on the list, according to the itinerary, Eros Cinema. This takes us into the Art Deco period.
Yeah, a classic Art Deco cinema hall. The source gives us some specifics. Built in 1938. Architect was Sorabji Kekushru Pedwar, and the inside decorations were by Fritz von Dryburgh.
And there was that great description. What was it? Like a wedding cake.
Yeah. It says the building resembles a wedding cake rising in tears with this semicircular tower on top. It really captures that Art Deco feel,
Yeah.
Streamlined, geometric, kind of glamorous.
Yeah.
Very different from the heavy Gothic style.
A symbol of modernity back then, I guess.
Absolutely, representing optimism, looking forward. Though one of the reviews did mention, practically speaking, that the cinema itself might be closed sometimes.
Right, but they said the outside is definitely still worth seeing, just as an example of the style.
Totally. A real landmark. Okay, moving on. We hit Rajabai Tower, the Big Ben of Mumbai.
That nickname says it all, doesn't it? It gives you that sense of a major city clock tower landmark.
It really does. And again, the sources confirm it's a UNESCO site, important revival Gothic building. Pretty old, too, about 125 years old, the material said.
But this one has a mix of styles, too, right? Not just Gothic.
Yeah, interestingly, the source mentioned it blends Gothic and Art Deco elements, which shows how styles evolved and influenced each other even in the same place over time. It's part of the Mumbai University complex.
Cool. And then the big one, the Gateway of India.
Arguably the most recognized symbol of Mumbai, wouldn't you say?
I think so. Instantly recognizable. But more than just a picture spot. It was built for a very specific reason.
That's right. To welcome King George V and Queen Mary when they visited India in 1911. A huge event at the time.
And the architecture reflects that.
Yeah, it's described as a triumphal arch. The style is mainly Indo-Saracenic, with some Muslim architectural elements mixed in.
Indo-Saracenic.
Ah.
That's that hybrid style the British used, right? Mixing European forms with Indian motifs.
Exactly. Things like domes, arches, intricate lattice work, blended with Gothic or neoclassical structures. For something like the Gateway, meant to welcome the Emperor King, using this style was probably a statement connecting to India's past, while also, asserting British presence.
But the story doesn't end there. The source material points out something incredibly significant about its later history.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just the grand entrance, it was also the exit. The last British troops formally left India through that very gateway, February 28, 1948.
Wow. Built to welcome the empire, and then the site marking its end. That's powerful symbolism packed into one structure.
It really frames the whole colonial period, doesn't it, start to finish?
Incredible. Okay, quickly touching on a few others mentioned. Empress Court.
Right, described as an impressive residential Art Deco building.
And the source added that social context living in buildings like that, these stylish Art Deco apartments, was a real mark of status and wealth back in the day.
Definitely part of that modern aspirational vibe of the era. Then there's the Mumbai High Court.
Another imposing one. Splendid specimen of Gothic architecture, the source called it. Designed by Colonel J.A. Fuller.
Yeah, huge towers, big staircases, and those symbolic statues on top, justice and mercy, meant to inspire respect for the law, apparently.
And one review mentioned you might sometimes get a peek inside the courtyard, even if you mostly see the outside.
Which gives you a different sense of its scale, I imagine. And finally, the David Sassoon Library, or Sassoon Library.
Founded way back in 1862 by David Sassoon, who was a major figure, a Jewish banker.
Yeah, another beautiful Gothic building. Started as a reading room and library.
And still impressive, the source mentioned it holds about 70,000 rare books and called it a good afternoon jaunt on its own.
Which is nice, showing these historic places are still active parts of the city.
So we've walked through the key stops mentioned in the sources, but it seems clear this tour is trying to do more than just point out pretty buildings.
Oh, absolutely. The sources definitely frame it as having a deeper purpose. It's about helping visitors understand or sort of unpack authentic India, its culture, its heritage, by looking at how it's physically expressed.
The architecture becomes a kind of text then, reflecting history.
Exactly. That blend of styles we kept seeing, Gothic from the British era, Art Deco from the boom times, Indian elements woven in, it's all presented as mirroring the city's complex past. One review specifically praised the guide for making those 200 years of colonial history feel alive using just the buildings.
And the reviews really hammered home the importance of the guide, didn't they? It wasn't just about the facts.
Not at all. People loved the historical background, sure, but what really stood out in the reviews was what they called the Meet the Mumbayer experience. Meaning the guide, someone named Pankaj, was mentioned positively, wasn't just a lecturer. They were explaining cultural nuances, telling stories, and, importantly, answering all sorts of questions. About history, yes, but also about culture, politics, just everyday life in Mumbai now.
That sounds like where the real connection happens. The authentic India bit maybe comes through those personal interactions and insights.
I think so. It becomes less of a history lesson and more of a conversation. And one review even mentioned the practical side of things, like navigating busy streets, maybe dealing with construction noise, like the subway work near CST.
Right, which is part of the real experience too, isn't it? These historic sites aren't in a museum display case. They're embedded in a living, breathing, sometimes messy, modern city.
Exactly. The tour experience itself becomes part of engaging with Mumbai as it is today, past and present, all jumbled together.
So pulling it all together, why should you, our listener, care about this deep dive into Mumbai's architecture? What's the takeaway?
Well, I think understanding this architectural tapestry, the Gothic, the Art Deco, the local blends, it's actually a really effective way, maybe even a shortcut, to grasping Mumbai's complex identity.
An identity shaped by so many forces.
Right. Its history as this major colonial port, its explosive growth into a modern megacity, and all the diverse cultural influences, Indian, British, Parsi, others that left their mark literally on the buildings.
And this specific tour, based on what we read, offers a really focused way to see that evolution. You get centuries of history and design changes condensed into a few hours of walking. It helps you read the city.
Yeah, it's more than just looking at old buildings. It's about seeing how history is physically built into the streets you're walking on, makes it tangible.
The sources also mention something about the tour company itself, about community impact.
Ah, yes, that was a nice detail. They mentioned an initiative by the company to strengthen the local community, specifically by training and employing local guides.
Which means the money travelers spend goes back into the community.
Exactly. It stays local, supports the people who live there, and are sharing their city stories. It's a positive model.
Definitely. So thinking about all this, seeing how Mumbai wears its history on its sleeve, architecturally speaking, Gothic here, Art Deco there, local touches mixed in it, does make you wonder, doesn't it?
Wonder what?
Well, how will the buildings we're putting up today tell the story of our time? With all our technology, our challenges, our values, what story will our architecture tell people centuries from now?
That's a really provocative thought to end on. Food for thought, for sure. So just to recap, this deep dive pulled out the key insights from the source material we had on this specific Mumbai walking tour, focusing on that rich Gothic and Art Deco heritage.
And hey, if listening to all this has sparked your interest, if you're thinking you might want to experience Mumbai's architectural story firsthand, the source material we reviewed did include contact details for the tour organizers.
That's right. The company is called Five Senses Tours. If you decide to travel to India, we have a recommendation based on this source material. Five Senses Tours organizes tours across India, which are immersive cultural experiences.
You can email them at contact@fivesensestours.com. And just remember, the 5 font is the numeral 5 in that email address.
Or you can WhatsApp them. The number provided in the source was +919 845 677 446. Just sharing the info that was available in the materials we look at for anyone interested in potentially booking the tour we've been discussing.
Definitely worth checking out if this deep dive got you curious.